Hello, I'm Juliette Mann. Welcome to Global Business Europe. Our top stories. Canada deals a $20 billion blow. Ottawa announces dollar-for-dollar counter-tariffs against the US. Economic D-Day for Iran. Tehran says it's ready to fight back against US attempts to cut it off from the global economy. Manga, money and MBS. Billions of dollars worth of deals signed during the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to Paris. And Level Up. The world's biggest gaming event is about to take centre stage in Germany. Canada has announced dollar-for-dollar tariffs on $20 billion worth of US goods, the latest blow in an escalating trade war. It also announced a multi-billion support package for businesses hit by US tariffs. The move follows Donald Trump's 50% duties imposed over the weekend after trade negotiations fell apart between the two countries.
This is an unprecedented challenge imposed on Canada. But Canada will meet the moment. Canadians will meet the moment. We will meet the moment together. And as the Prime Minister has said, we will support our workers, our businesses and our industry with whatever it takes for as long as it takes.
Our correspondent, Karina Hooper, is in Montreal. Hi there, Karina. So, give us the details. Talk us through these countermeasures. What do we know?
Yeah, Juliette, it's moving very quickly today, but what we know about these tariffs on U.S. goods, we're looking at about 700 U.S. products that are going to be impacted, and the tariff amount will range from 15% to 50%, hitting everything from U.S. seafood to motorcycles to apparel, paper products. But the steepest tariff, 50%, is going to be reserved for certain U.S. dairy products, as well as cosmetic and lumber. Now, the tariffs will go into effect on September 8th. Now, what is Canada doing to protect itself amid this trade war? Well, as you mentioned, the finance minister recently announced a package that is worth about $5.5 billion U.S. It's on top of the $18 billion U.S. package that has been given to Canadian workers since this trade war started 18 months ago. And this is really targeting small and medium-sized businesses who will feel the most pain in this trade war. So what Canada's trying to do is created a special rapid response program which will allow businesses to access funds quickly. They're also making changes to Canada's employment insurance program so that workers who are laid off can access benefits quicker and larger amounts of benefits. So the Canadian government is really preparing for the long haul. It knows that businesses will be hurt. Small businesses themselves are trying to diversify their trading partners away from the United States. But as expected, it is going to be painful for Canadians. Juliette?
Karina Hooper in Montreal, thank you for bringing us up to date. Well, Ali Renison is a former UK Trade Department official. Great to have you back on Global Business Europe. Now, look, Trump told Canada to fall in line or face something far worse. That threat appears to have backfired, hasn't it?
Well, it's certainly provoking a sort of more than considered reaction, shall we say, from not just from the Prime Minister of Canada in terms of suspending talks with the negotiations with the US, but also you're seeing the likes of the Ontario sort of provincial sort of leader, Mr. Ford, talking about threatening to cut off, or encouraging the cutoff of things like electricity, basically non-tariff measures to respond to the US. So the escalation is certainly back on the cards.
Now, Carney says Washington wants to destroy our major industry. That's about as blunt as diplomatic language gets. Has this now moved beyond a trade dispute into something more personal, do you think?
Well, depending on who you listen to, and right now it's certainly a battle of the narratives about why the talks fell apart, exactly what provisions in the agreement. We don't have the text exactly, but we're taking different just depictions between the Canadian and the U.S. side, between President Trump and Mark Carney, even some of the chief negotiators involved about what it fell apart over. And I think that there are some provisions in there that some might argue, certainly the U.S. wanted to put into the agreement, that go beyond sort of trade measures to do with sort of what the Canadians consider to be matters of sovereignty relating to economic security, or the way in which they kind of organize their audio-visual sort of media sectors, particularly the cultural areas around sort of French language programming. So it's starting to sort of take shape that it's perhaps what the U.S. wanted to put into the deal goes beyond what the Canadians might consider to be trade matters.
Yeah, I mean, some analysts told us that this pain and this focus on what really counts as a trade matter is really only short and medium term for Canada's businesses, that a future U.S. administration eventually will reset things. Does Carney actually believe that, or is he playing for today's headlines?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that there is, on the one hand, an anticipation, perhaps in the future things might sort of settle down. But certainly when you look at the provisions, the details of the measures that the Canadian government is putting together to support businesses in terms of diversification funds, cash, so things to help with cash flow losses from sort of tariffs, that they are digging in. On the other hand, I think that Mark Carney is certainly enjoying his man of the moment in terms of the headlines as being the only leader to really sort of stand up to President Trump's efforts on trade, shall we say.
Ali, Ottawa's putting $7.5 billion Canadian dollars behind its Canadian workers and businesses to help them weather these tariffs. Is it confidence, or is it a sign of just how much pain they're actually bracing for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of both when you look at the sort of some of the measures, and that's more interesting than I think the detail that we have yet to get in full about what the retaliatory tariffs are going to target. Yeah. But certainly there's a lot of detail already behind what the Canadians are putting in place to try and support their businesses. They are very well aware that some of the measures that the U.S. trade team is targeting, they're going after provinces where they have restricted, for example, U.S. whiskey sales. So they are trying to sort of gear up and acknowledge the fact that with the way in which the U.S. is going after the Canadian economy, very targeted, and they want to make sure that they are there because ultimately, in terms of the retaliatory tariffs that Canada is going to put on U.S. imports, those are going to hurt. Those are going to hurt domestic economies. So I think the detail that they're putting behind some of the support package is a reflection and acknowledgement of that.
Ali Renasant, thank you very much. We're calling it the greatest financial offensive ever on Iran. Washington has announced an economic D-Day to cut off Iran from the global economy. Iran says it is fully prepared for the widened sanctions, which would lead to another defeat for the US. Washington added any nation financially partnering with Iran would also be isolated, as well as banks and businesses dealing with the country. Our correspondent Nick Harper is in Washington. Hi there, Nick. So, any reaction to the announcement by Canada? Let's start with that.
Yeah, Julia, starting with that, no direct announcement from the Trump administration. President Trump posted a few times earlier today, ahead of that announcement coming out of Canada. In those posts, he said that Canada had been ripping off the US for decades, also saying that Canada was easily the most difficult and unreasonable country to work with. And then a strange post in which he said that the US was considering changing the name of Lake Ontario, that borders the US and Canada, and changing it to Lake America because, he said, he didn't think the US would be doing much business with Ontario any longer. We did hear from a Trump administration official about 20 minutes ago, Brooke Rollins, the agricultural secretary. She was speaking to reporters just outside of the White House. Now, she refused to give any direct answers about what we had heard from Canada, but she did say that Canada was a very important trading partner. She also said that based on her experience, the president's decisions always work out in the trade realm. And she said when negotiations between the two countries had finally been finished, she thought the US would be in a much better spot. Her answers seemed to be slightly out of step with reality, considering what we'd heard from Canada during the course of the day and that ramping up of rhetoric, the likelihood of those tariffs coming in 2 weeks' time, but also the likelihood of the US increasing tariffs, perhaps more retaliatory tariffs on Canada as a result of that announcement this morning.
Yeah, I know we're going to be talking about this a lot more as the week goes on. Let's come back to this economic D-Day, Nick, and tell us more about Besant's announcement, and how it's playing out domestically.
Yeah, domestically, I think there's a lot of worry here in the United States about what it could potentially mean. Scott Bessent detailed about 60 companies, entities, individual individual ships as well around the world who have now got sanctions placed on them. But there's also that threat of really a blanket sanction on any country that deals with Iran and continues to use it as a trading partner. The worry in the United States is that those countries, if the US follows through with its threats, could impose retaliatory sanctions on either US businesses or perhaps put some blanket tariffs in place on US goods, all of it potentially increasing the cost of living here for US consumers at a time when they have been seeing the effects of the conflict with Iran, keeping inflation high, rising the cost of goods and increasing, of course, the costs of gasoline, petrol for motorists at the pump. So I think some concern for US consumers seeing this play out and really worrying what the backlash might be for the United States and US companies and consumers. Juliet?
Nick Harper in Washington, D.C., thank you very much. Well, with an escalating trade war with Canada and those expanded sanctions on Iran, our correspondent Mitch McGann is in New York with the markets reaction. Hi there, Mitch. So a lot for the markets to digest on this Tuesday with Canada-US tariffs, with the fresh sanctions on Iran. What's going on?
Yeah, hi, Julia. Look, a lot is going on, as you mentioned. Let's start with the broad market indexes, which look relatively unaffected by the Canadian announcement at this stage. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 0.2%. The S&P 500 is up about 0.3%, and the Nasdaq was up over 0.5% a short time ago. Let's take a look at some of the Canadian tariffs that were announced this morning and where that might affect US stocks and the market. Steel and aluminium are two of the key sectors that Canada is targeting. But the early reaction from here in the United States is a muted one so far from steelmakers. Nucor, based in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's up almost 0.5% today. Steel Dynamics in Indiana is down 0.4%. So no significant movement. That's perhaps because America's own tariffs on Canadian steel may actually help the domestic market here, since buyers are less likely to source from Canada. So we'll have to see in the coming hours how that's going to play out. Another area affected is seafood and fish exports. In fact, when I had a look at the tariffs that Canada had imposed this morning, the first page really had a lot of fish and seafood exports on that list. It's hard to know, though, the impact on American seafood exporters in terms of their stock prices, because actually most of the companies that export to Canada, such as Trident Seafoods, American Seafoods, these are private companies. The same goes for dairy, another industry that Canada has targeted. However, it's a similar story there. Dairy Farmers of America is not public, neither is Leprino Foods, which is a major cheese company. It's also private, but there are some telltale signs elsewhere. Motorcycles are targeted. Harley Davidson, an American company that's well known around the world. It's based in Wisconsin. It will be impacted by Canada's 50% tariff on motorcycles that is due to come into force on September 8. Its stock now is down 1.85%. Another category of interest listed in Canada's tariffs is beauty or makeup preparations and preparations for care of the skin. So makeup. Estee Lauder, which is based here in New York, it's down 0.4% this afternoon. Kenvue, which owns Aveeno and Neutrogena, it's down 0.85%. And Coty, which is another major brand, it has brands like CoverGirl and Max Factor makeup, it's down 4.8%. So this is having an effect on US stocks, but I would say it's uneven across a broad range of sectors, and many of the businesses affected by the Canadian announcement are also private, as I mentioned, like in the seafood sector. So it's hard to know the direct impact on their value, but for the likes of Harley Davidson and those makeup brands that I mentioned, this will certainly hurt them, and we're going to keep a close eye on some of those stocks like steel and aluminium in the coming hours to see if there's more reaction after this Canadian announcement earlier today.
Mitch McGann in New York, thank you very much. Toy company Lego is building on a record first half, with revenue jumping 21% to more than $6.5 billion. The Danish brickmaker has broadened its range, while demand has remained strong for its Formula One cars. More than 300 new products hit the shelves during the first 6 months of the year. Workers at South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix have narrowly rejected a wage deal that would have paid most employee bonuses in company stock. The shares have fallen nearly 20% in recent weeks as investors question whether AI stocks have become overvalued. Under the proposal, wages would have risen by more than 6%. This is Global Business Europe, still ahead. Game on. Cologne is about to become the centre of the gaming world as the industry's biggest names unveil what's next.
Everything is a business story.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with me, Juliet Mann. The headlines. Canada deals a $20 billion blow. Ottawa announces dollar-for-dollar counter-tariffs against the US. And economic D-Day for Iran. Tehran says it's ready to fight back against US attempts to cut it off from the global economy. A manga-inspired theme park will be built in Paris following a landmark deal between France and Saudi Arabia. It's among billions of dollars worth of projects given the green light during Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's state visit to France. Our correspondent Sarah Coates reports.
Well, quite a lot came out of this visit, with France and Saudi Arabia signing more than 20 agreements and MOUs covering everything from transport and energy to defence, artificial intelligence, tourism and culture. Now, one of the biggest announcements was a multi-billion-dollar Saudi investment in a major leisure and entertainment project just outside Paris, which the French government says will eventually create thousands of jobs. There were also deals around transport and infrastructure, including rail projects and port facilities. Now, technology was another big part of discussions, particularly in artificial intelligence, with the two sides also agreeing to work more closely on energy and mining. There was movement too on defence cooperation, along with further agreements around tourism, heritage and culture. But I think the main point here is this was more than just signing a handful of deals. It was about building a wider economic relationship. Riyadh is looking to bring in more investment and expertise as it continues to diversify its economy beyond oil, while France is chasing more Saudi investment here and more opportunities for French businesses in the kingdom. So there wasn't really one single deal that defined the visit. Instead, what we saw was a fairly broad package of agreements across a number of different sectors, and that really tells you where this relationship is heading. France and Saudi are trying to move beyond the more traditional areas of energy and defence and build something deeper around investment, technology, infrastructure and business. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
The future of gaming is on show in Cologne. From blockbuster new releases to the growing role of AI, Gamescom 2026 is bringing together hundreds of thousands of gamers and some of the industry's biggest names for 5 days of launches, announcements and plenty of gameplay. Well, China has more than 680 million gamers, nearly half the population. The local market has never been bigger, but some Chinese firms are eyeing growth beyond the border. Here's our correspondent Michael Marillier with more. Michael.
Juliet, thanks very much. China's gaming companies are winning at home, but can they win overseas? Let's take a look at the data. Domestic sales climbing above $49 billion last year. That's an all-time record for China. It's also 7.7% higher than the year before. So pretty strong growth. Now, domestic sales include games bought in China but made overseas. Still, 83% of sales were linked to games made in China. Meanwhile, Chinese games earned $20 billion in overseas markets. That's less than half the value of the domestic market, but there is growth. Foreign sales up more than 10% year on year. Now, there is a clear example of this, and that's Black Myth Wukong. Chinese developer Game Science sold 10 million copies within 3 days. Some reports suggest it's now approaching 30 million. And here's the key point. Over the last 2 years, 50% of sales came from outside China. Here's another example. Teamy Studio Group is the developer behind Honor of Kings, Delta Force and Call of Duty Mobile. These are some of the most popular games in the world. And just last year, Teamy said it had 100 million active users from outside the Chinese mainland. That's an all-time record for the company, which was founded in 2008. So there are signs that Chinese firms are making their mark, both at home and away. And that will be a key message at global events like Gamescom. And let's get the latest from Gamescom. Correspondent Peter Oliver is at the event in Germany. Peter, the data suggests that Chinese developers are doing pretty well in foreign markets, but what are you hearing from the players at Gamescom?
Well, they're certainly very happy, those Chinese developers who are here in Cologne for Gamescom 2026. The big names, you're talking about Tencent, Miaho and NetEase, they're all very strongly represented here. Just behind me, you might be able to see some crowds gathering for the opening of the Gamescom that takes place in a little while's time, the opening night here. You might also maybe able to hear some champagne corks popping from companies like Tencent, who are certainly, as I said, here to show off some of their wares and celebrate the success that they've had so far. Tencent are putting on a display here at Gamescom with a stall that is 700 square meters in size. That's much bigger, twice the size of Microsoft's. It's about the size of 5 tennis courts or 10 basketball courts, if you will. We'll be having a good look around that as this week progresses. But those other companies like GameSource that you mentioned with Black Myth Wukong, they're looking to try and put out new games as well as other Chinese manufacturers to show that that wasn't a one-hit wonder. But despite all of those, all of the eyes that will be focused on the Chinese developers and manufacturers here at Gamescom, there's still plenty more to see elsewhere.
The world's biggest gaming event is powering up. Gamescom will bring hundreds of thousands of players, developers and industry figures to Cologne with the latest releases, new technology and the future of gaming all on display.
As the exhibitors put the final touches to their stands and the first visitors arrive, there's plenty for them to look forward to.
Honestly, it's my first expo, so I'm kind of excited for everything. Excited for the talks and the new games, of course.
I think I look forward to seeing pretty cool indie games in the indie game lounge. It's like usually the best part of the Gamescom for me.
I'm just looking forward, like going through the halls and seeing what catches me the most and playing that, basically.
And among the titles competing for attention are a growing number coming out of China. Chinese-developed games are nominated across several categories at this year's Gamescom Awards, as the country's studios increasingly target players far beyond their domestic market. But Gamescom isn't only about what people will be playing next. Artificial intelligence is expected to be one of the industry's biggest talking points, promising new ways of making games, while also raising questions about the resources needed to power it.
What's really important here is that we demand transparency from model developers to understand how much energy, water and things like that are being used.
Lisa Pack heads Playing for the Planet, a UN-backed alliance which has grown from 19 gaming companies in 2019 to over 60 today, including some of the biggest names in the gaming world. She says an event the size of Gamescom can help push change much further.
This is one of the biggest events in the industry, so everybody is going to be here. When one event makes big steps, the other event really can't stay behind.
New games, new technology and some big questions about where the industry goes next. For the next few days, Cologne is where developers will show what they believe the future of gaming looks like, and players will get their first chance to decide whether they agree.
Well, Gamescom will be open to the press on Wednesday. We'll be having a good look around at what those big gaming companies are showing off. On Thursday, it's open to the public, and that is when we get a look at what everybody's coming at in their particular cosplay. Back to you, Juliet. Are you one for dressing up?
I am. You know me well, Peter. Anyway, thanks very much, Peter in Cologne. And we will, as he said, be covering Gamescom throughout the week, bringing you all the very latest news, announcement, highlights and costumes. Now, humanoid robots are getting faster, stronger and more capable, but investors are watching for the moment they can do more than compete. At the World Humanoid Robot Games in Beijing, some say that the turning point could come as soon as next year. Our reporters Cheng Jiangqi and Yang Chengqi have more.
Faster, stronger and more autonomous. That's what humanoid robots are demonstrating at the second World Humanoid Robot Games here in Beijing.
Behind me, this is the 100-meter obstacle race final, a true trial of speed and ability.
Robots must navigate bridges, slopes, and platforms, testing their balance, coordination, and ability to overcome obstacles. Complex challenges expose weakness in algorithms and joint control, giving developers a roadmap for the next round of upgrades.
Investors are also looking at where robots make mistakes in these competitions. Those failure points could point to where the industry needs to focus next.
The progress is clear. One robot ran 100 meters in 9.39 seconds, beating Usain Bolt's world record. Another jumped 2.88 meters, also surpassing the human record. But speed and strength are only part of the challenge.
China is hosting a sports competition for humanoid robots. But apart from the usual running and jumping, well, nothing says Chinese robot more than a bit of Tai Chi.
Unlike in events where robots are already superhuman, there are other areas where they still need to work, like balance and precision. That's why
they're also competing in these.
This is a competition specifically for robot hands.
The robot has to weigh out 20 grams of salt within a limited amount of time, with an accuracy of plus or minus 0.5 grams.
Other robots are competing in tasks like building blocks, opening bottles, and even picking up beans with tweezers.
And if you think about it, that is one of the biggest reasons why we're designing robots to be in a human shape in the first place, so that they can use human tools. And it all comes down to the hands.
So, when will the humanoid robot industry reach its next turning point? Analysts say there is no easy timeline, but the day that robots enter people's homes should not be far off.
There are already some impressive demos for home applications, so I think it's quite possible that by next year we could start seeing some humanoid robots gradually entering people's homes.
Robot capabilities at this stage present a mixed picture. They are stronger than humans in some areas, but seriously lagging in others. This sports competition gives the audience a taste of each and gives developers stronger incentives to do better next time. Chen Jiaqi, Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Beijing.
The headlines. Canada deals a $20 billion blow. Ottawa announces dollar-for-dollar counter-tariffs against the US. Economic D-Day for Iran. Tehran says it's ready to fight back against US attempts to cut it off from the global economy. That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching. Coming up next on CGTN, Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.